First off, this video is not a how-to do brakes. There's plenty of other sources for that. This is just a series of random clips from stuff I thought about when prepping for track and figured it might be worth sharing with some other people, getting the most out of the stock brakes on these cars. So these are my Ferodo DS312 front pads after, 7 days on track. Most of that at VIR, 1 day at Summit Point on the Jefferson circuit last year. These things have held up really well. You can see like a tiny crack starting right there, but it's not through the pad. It's just a little surface crack. Shit happens with tracked pads. These things, the lowest one measures 14.5 millimeters total thickness. Brand new, they are 19 millimeters thick. These actually have enough life left to get at least another day safely. I generally try to discard them when the friction material is as thick as the backing plate, which is right around 7 millimeters, which this one right here, I actually screwed up. This one here is actually tapered a pretty good bit. I was not thinking right when I put the pads in. Normally on the brakes, the upper portion wears faster due to all of the pad material stripping as the rotor goes around. This is front of the car here. As the rotor goes forward, all of the material here clumps up and has to pass between the pad and the rotor right here at the back, at the trailing edge. So it angles the entire pad outwards and it forces the leading edge of the pad to wear quicker than the trailing edge. And at the last 2-day weekend at VIR, I was not thinking right, and I threw 2 of the pads in exactly like this, and they wore out. This one got tapered like crazy. So it's about a 2 millimeter taper from one end to the other. It still is technically acceptable. I'm just gonna throw it in probably on the inside like this, but I'm gonna hold on to these, run them at Festivus later this year at Summit Point. And I am putting these brand new DS312s on because I've got a 3-day weekend at VIR coming up in a couple days. One of those days is an 8-hour private test day, so there'll be plenty of track time. Got brand new Zimmerman blanks going on. The old ones, you can see, starting to get heat checked. They're actually in pretty good shape. The inside is not checked at all, so that tells me that the outside is running hotter. So I think that these RS3 deflectors definitely do something meaningful. And while I did not do this for the first several track days, something I just started doing is pulling the little GTI plate off of the front calipers, because realistically speaking, while it may or may not do anything, it's absolutely not doing anything useful. So in my opinion, the only thing it could be doing is blocking airflow. Perhaps it will allow just a little bit of air on the back side of the pad. And I did forget to mention, but these rotors are still okay to run. None of the cracks are heading to the very outside edge. They're not splitting. And while I've got gloves on, none of these will actually catch a fingernail or anything. They're pretty much just right on the very surface. It's definitely a good idea to check them frequently after every session. It's kind of convenient that the outside happens to crack before the inside, so don't have to be checking the inside, but there's always, you never know if a pad might be hanging up or something, and it's still a really good idea to stick your head underneath and shine a flashlight and check things over in between sessions, or at least at the end of the day before the next day. Something else I like to do once I have the rotors off, if any time you're removing the rotors, whether you're replacing them or removing them for whatever other reason, you're going to be reusing them, go ahead and just take a brass bristle brush and just scrub this area here. You can usually do it a little bit less awkwardly if you're not holding a phone to record stuff, but This left side I've already gone through and rubbed everything out. The rotor actually seats on, there's a little raised edge here and a raised edge here. Everything in the middle technically does not matter because it's recessed. But, and like I said, I've done half of, like the left half of this. The right side, you can still see some of like the surface rust. But moving on to the caliper brackets, we're gonna go ahead and just clean up the little spots where the pads ride. If you take a look right, let's see, right here and right in there, there, those are where the pad was riding. And basically you just want to take a wire brush and scuff it up right around there and right inside of that groove. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now because I hate holding the camera and doing weird shit like this. Voila, YouTube magic. Now that those are all cleaned up, we can go ahead and throw the bracket back on since the new rotor is on and get these pads ready to go on. So here's two of the brand new pads going on. The one on the left, I have not squeezed the clip yet. The one on the right, what I typically like to do, I like to try and take up all the free slack. That way the pad moves very freely within the bracket. On track, one of the last things you want is the pads to be sticking because it just creates extra heat, and heat is bad. So try and demonstrate this as unawkwardly as possible. So first, one of the pads as they come from Ferodo, and this is how like factory pads and everything fit too. You kind of layer it in there, squeeze it, and it's pretty good effort to move the pad in the bracket. Great if you don't want the pads to squeal, even though these ones are still going to sound like pigs just because of the compound. But if you want them to last on track or just in general, the ones that have had the clips closed just a little bit, stick those in there. Move nice and freely with very, very little resistance by comparison. Real simple, just trying to show what you do. Take your, give them a little squeeze, and good to go. So we've got our pads fitted. Now it's just a dry fit right now. I haven't lubed them up, but we're going to take a quick look at something. So if you look within where the pad intersects, where it hits the bracket, you can see that this point right here, this flat surface, is the only spot where it actually makes contact in the downward direction. This is where all of the weight of the pads, braking, everything pretty much comes to. So this is where you're going to want to lube it. You can also do it on the top side. That's mainly only comes into effect in reverse. It'll move up and down just a tiny bit. And then I typically throw just a tiny bit of lube right on the edge of this metal clip here and on this springy clip and on the edge of this springy clip right here. So in this corner and right there. You can see where I just put a little bit on the edges there and right there. Literally all I do is I just put a tiny dab on my pinky finger and I take care of all of the pad ears on one side. So this one's already done and in here. So now we'll just go ahead and throw this bad boy in here. And see how it moves nice and freely. And the last thing to take care of before putting the caliper back on is basically lube up the caliper pins. I typically use this stuff called Seal Glide. You can get it from Napa, AutoZone, whatever. I'm pretty sure just about anywhere. It's a silicone-based grease. I've had bad luck with other things in the past, including the Permatex ceramic purple stuff that is supposedly rated to 3,000 degrees. That stuff turns into this chunky doo-doo butter. And basically all the oil burns off and it's left with this chalky stuff, and it seizes the pins in the caliper. I had a Mazda 2 that would do that after about 3 days of daily driving. Hated the stuff. Ruined a $200 some set of G-lock pads. That was awesome. This stuff, I've had great luck with it consistently, and it's what I've used for all of these, for the 4 pad contact points on each side, and also for these caliper pins. I just push it in, and I usually just make sure that there's no air suction trying to push the caliper outwards, because it can have a little bit of a airlock inside of the boot. Get rid of that, because a set of brand new pads means the whole caliper is going to be sitting further outwards, and as it wears it's going to move inwards. So you definitely don't want to start out with a bunch of air trying to force the whole caliper body to the inside, which would wear the outside pad quicker. If you ever have an experience with wearing the outside pad considerably faster than the inside pad, the first place to look is going to be your slide pins, making sure that they're clean and lubed. I replace these things yearly with OEM parts when possible. I'm not sure if they're actually available for the Volkswagen. I've been tracking this thing for just about a year, and they'll be getting replaced after this next event. But yeah, that's a thing to religiously take care of, to make sure that these sliding calipers work as intended. And the very last thing to know before putting your caliper back on, go ahead and put a little dab of blue Loctite. I have like some kind of gel Loctite BS stuff to put on here. Volkswagen says you're supposed to replace these bolts. These are not torque to yield, and actually neither are the caliper brackets. On my particular car, they get torqued to 147 foot-pounds or 200 Newton meters. These things, I'll have to double check it, but I believe it's like 30 Newton meters or something. But you're going to want to look up the spec for your specific car either way to be 100% sure, because I'm not a service manual. But essentially, make sure these things are Loctited. If you don't, replace them, torque them to spec, and you should be good to go.